A critical trip to the polls. Local 5 is proud to bring you a deeper look at the candidates running for Wisconsin's U.S. Senate seat. The candidates from Wisconsin running to be part of the United States Congress. And the candidates running for Wisconsin State Legislature. This is Newsmaker Sunday, Behind the Ballot.
Welcome to our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot special. I'm Tom Zalaski. Well, we are now hours away from the election, and over the past few months, we've talked with candidates for seats in both Washington and Madison, representing Northeast Wisconsin. In this program, we will reintroduce you to the candidates in some of Wisconsin's biggest races. So first up, outside of the presidential race, the race Wisconsinites are watching the most is the U.S. Senate contest. Senator Tammy Baldwin seeking her third term as she takes on Republican challenger Eric Hovde. Senator Baldwin sat down with me recently to talk to me about why she should head back to Washington. The Tammy Baldwin resume, if you will. What was the road from that tough childhood to being United States Senator?
Yeah. Well, as you know, my mother struggled with addiction to prescription painkillers because of her chronic back pain. She also struggled with mental illness. She also chose, when I was only 2 months old, to move back with her parents. And I had my grandparents to raise me. And I am so fortunate to have had their love and stability throughout my life. When I was 9 years old, I had a serious childhood illness of my own that landed me in the hospital for 3 months. My grandparents had health insurance, but they found out in my time of need that their health insurance didn't cover grandchildren. I was not their legal dependent. And so they did what any responsible guardians would do. They looked high and low for health insurance to cover me. But back then, there was no legal obligation on the part of health insurance companies to provide coverage to people with pre-existing conditions or existing conditions like cancer or diabetes or asthma. So millions of Americans went without health insurance. So between watching my mother's struggles and watching my grandparents worry about me, I resolved at a very young age that I wanted to do something to help fix our broken healthcare system. And I ended up running for office, ran for state level office. And when I was in the House of Representatives, I got to sit on the committee that wrote the Affordable Care Act. And in fact, we told those health insurance companies, you can no longer discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. And it was my amendment, Tom, that allowed young people to stay on their parents' health insurance till they turn 26.
Abortion, why is that such a top of mind issue for you?
You know, this issue comes down to who decides. And my opponent thinks that politicians should make the choice. I think women should decide. And so I am the lead author of a bill called the Women's Health Protection Act, which would make Roe v. Wade the law of the land. But anyone who opposes that is okay with the idea that your rights and freedoms should vary from state to state or zip code to zip code. You know, in Wisconsin, we have an 1849 era criminal abortion ban. And it has led to the circumstance that only, 69 out of our 72 counties have no access. Just 3 do. And we've heard the harrowing stories of women bleeding out, facing the risk of sepsis before they could get care. In other states, we have bans at 6 weeks. We have states with no exceptions for rape and incest. We have states that have criminalized traveling out of state to get care that one needs. This should not be allowed to stand. I will fight to restore the rights and freedoms of Roe v. Wade.
The White House, Biden administration, is getting pummeled right now over inflation. What say you to that? How do we get it under control?
So we know that a lot of the cause of prices going up was supply chain breakdowns and the basic economic laws of supply and demand during the pandemic. But the fact now that supply chains have been fixed and cost of production for grocery and household items has gone down, but the corporations who make these products have not lowered the price. There's price gouging going on right now. While we saw inflation go up 14% over a period of years, at the same time, corporate profits went up 5%. I think consumers need a cop on the beat fighting for them, holding price gougers accountable. But in other areas, we've been successful in bringing down costs. I have fought the big pharmaceutical companies, and we've made recent headway lowering the price of asthma inhalers, of insulin to no more than $35 per month out of pocket for seniors. We have made headway on getting Medicare to negotiate with the big pharmaceutical companies to lower the price of prescription drugs, something that every other country does, and that's why every other country pays far less than we do. But we need to do more. We need to lower the cost of childcare and housing, and that's what we're working on.
The current administration also taking a beating from Republicans on the immigration issue, the southern border. What say you to that? How do we stop the flow of illegal immigrants?
So at the beginning of this year, we had a bipartisan negotiation in the Senate. Our product, drafted by one of the most conservative senators, Jim Langford from Oklahoma, would have added 1,500 new Border Patrol agents to the southern border. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed this bill. And it would have also surged technology capable of screening every vehicle that comes through our port of entry so that we can interdict illegal fentanyl that is wreaking havoc across our state and across this country. It had bipartisan support until Republicans like my opponent, Eric Hovde, decided that they would prefer to have this as an issue politically than have a solution. Had we passed that in the early spring, as planned, we would have 1,500 more Border Patrol agents on the southern border. We would be screening every vehicle coming in, and we would be making headway. But again, you can see from their television ads that they wanted this for a political win and not real solutions to this problem.
The Made in America, Made in Wisconsin, what does that mean to you?
Well, Buy America rules are the simple idea that when we're paying taxpayer dollars, when we're spending taxpayer dollars, we ought to be supporting U.S. workers and U.S. small businesses rather than sending those tax dollars overseas. And I have fought for adding Buy America rules to many pieces of major legislation. And I was successful in getting permanent Buy America rules attached to the bipartisan infrastructure law, which means we're rebuilding our infrastructure with American steel and American concrete rather than sourcing that overseas. We are seeing work come back to Wisconsin. We celebrated in southeastern Wisconsin 200 new jobs in Kenosha County because we are now making some of the components for our broadband buildup right here rather than sourcing them overseas. Buy America rules keep businesses like our foundries in Wisconsin, keep them going. Those jobs without Buy America policies would be going overseas.
I want to give you one chance to tell the voters why we should send Senator Tammy Baldwin back to Washington.
Well, as I've said, I am somebody who wants to fight for Wisconsin, the great hardworking people of our state, whether they work in our agricultural sector or manufacturing sector, or whether they're part of the team that are rebuilding the infrastructure of our state. I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity for a great job that will support their family. And I want to see many pathways to that job, whether those are apprenticeships where you can earn while you learn, or 2 years of community or technical college. I want to make that tuition free to make it affordable. I also want people to have access to high quality healthcare. I've already talked with your audience about the fights that I've engaged in to improve access, but the fights that we still have to continue. But Wisconsin needs a senator who is working for them, not simply for the ultra wealthy and profitable corporations. We need a champion, and I will be that champion.
As we said, Senator Baldwin's opponent is Wisconsin native and businessman Eric Hovde. After the break, we hear from a Republican as he tries to unseat the incumbent on Election Day. Welcome back to our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot special, getting you closer to the candidates in Wisconsin's biggest races. In our last segment, we heard from Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin. Now we hear from her opponent, businessman and banker Eric Hovde, as he tries to unseat the incumbent. Eric, we all know of your incredible business success, so I'm sure the Senate salary of about $175,000 is not what motivates you here. So why are you running?
Look, it's real simple, Tom. And I know it sounds old-fashioned and corny, but I love my country. We're blessed to live in this wonderful country we call America. Our founding fathers gave us the most beautiful document, our Constitution, that provided us more civil liberties, freedoms, and prosperity than any country has ever provided its people. But when I look what's unfolding in our country the last 3.5, 4 years, and it's gone on longer than that, but particularly the last 4 years, I feel like I've walked into Alice in Wonderland, where what is right has become wrong, what is wrong has become right. And I'm worried about issues like our financial security with all the debt that they've racked up that's bankrupting our country and robbing our children's and our grandchildren's future, our domestic security with the open border. There's so many layers to that issue. Obviously, the crime, compounding the affordability of housing and healthcare, the fentanyl crisis that I've been talking about for a long time, and they're created a humanitarian crisis. And then what's going on in the world? The world is engulfed in conflict, and it doesn't need to be that way. And then lastly, I think we've just become too divided as a country. The rhetoric needs to come down. I mean, look at the campaign I'm running against Senator Baldwin. She makes up crazy stuff saying, I'm a Californian. I am not a Californian. I'm a fourth generation Wisconsinite, and every one of her ads is just an attack on me, calling me a jerk. That's not constructive. I believe we've got to start lowering the rhetoric, coming together. As I like to say, we've got to stop putting on the red jersey or blue jersey. We got to put on the red, white, and blue jersey.
Inflation, quickly, how do we get it under control?
Inflation is always a monetary event. What does I mean by that? Inflation is caused by printing too much money, chasing the same amount of goods and services. Inflation got started, it was dormant for 40 years, but President Biden supported such significant spending that they increased federal spending by 40 to 50%. As a result, the Federal Reserve, the bank for the federal government, had to increase the money supply. And that's what ignited the cost of people's food prices to go up and everything they touch. So we have to get serious. We're bankrupting our country, and we have to address this issue and get ourselves back on a fiscal path of sanity and keeping prices stable and starting to decline.
Another big issue in this cycle, and you mentioned it earlier, the southern border. What's your answer to that?
Look, we have to close the southern border. We have to fix our immigration laws and asylum laws, where our country is unlike any other country in the world. You know, if you step foot into our country, you get the rights almost like you're that of a citizen. In almost every single other country, you don't. We have to put back, stay in Mexico, finish the wall. We also, though, have to fix legal immigration. That we want good people coming into our country. We have certain needs. We're short nurses and doctors in this country, and particularly as us baby boomers age. So, you know, we should fix the legal immigration process, where people are given a thumbs up or thumbs down within a 3, 4, 5-year period. Maybe use a point system if you have skill sets that we could use. That would allow them to come in a bit quicker, and maybe a work permit program.
Healthcare system, everyone's talking about it. What's broken in your mind, and what needs to be fixed?
Look, when President Obama passed Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, he said that it would slow down the increase in costs, make healthcare more accessible, and you'd be able to keep your family doctor. All three things were wrong. Healthcare costs have only accelerated higher. Access to care is collapsing, particularly in a lot of our rural communities. And then lastly, the family doctors all but disappeared, but for very few spots. So it just hasn't worked. The one provision that was good about the Affordable Care Act was pre-existing conditions. Look, I have multiple sclerosis. I got diagnosed as a young 27-year-old guy. So, you know, I went through a lot of tough years. Fortunately, my MS has been stable now for almost 20 years. But so I understand the importance of that. How do we go about fixing it? There's so many things that it would take me an hour to go all explain, but let me touch on a few things. First of all, we've allowed monopolies and oligarchies to be created. That cannot exist. They have extreme pricing power when that happens. Secondly, there's something called the medical loss ratio that capped what insurance companies could make. And as a result, it took away the incentive for them to push back down on healthcare costs. And in fact, gave them the incentive to let healthcare costs rise. Third, and probably one of the most important things, is we got to create price transparency. Think everything you buy in life, you go into any store, there's a price. But yet when you have to go get a medical procedure or service, you have no price. They'll give you an 800 number. You'll spend hours on the phone. If you come out of surgery, the price they gave you is often very different than what they bill you. Abortion,
you have made your stance very clear on it, totally against. Why is that your feeling?
No, that's not my stance, Tom. I'm opposed to a national abortion ban. That's just a lie by Senator Baldwin. I've always agreed with exceptions. Look, I believe in the beauty of life because I have 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Yet I've always agreed with exceptions for rape and incest and the health of the mother. And I believe that early on in a woman's pregnancy, she should have a right to choose. What I disagree with is where a baby can be born healthy and alive to be terminated, in my view, is unconscionable. So Senator Baldwin has pushed for legislation that would allow to terminate a baby up to the point of delivery. I do not find that acceptable at all. As I said, I find it unconscionable. So I draw a very distinct difference. And frankly, I think I am where most of the people of Wisconsin are, that there's reasonable limits, but you have to provide for exceptions, and that early on in a pregnancy, a woman can decide.
I want to give you a chance to give your elevator pitch as to why the people of Wisconsin should send Eric Hovde to Washington as the next U.S. Senator.
Sure. Our founding fathers wanted citizen legislators, people that had skill sets in the real world, be it a business person, a farmer, or a doctor, that went and served their country and brought their skills to serve their country. Unfortunately, we've developed a political class, which Senator Baldwin is a career politician who's never operated in the real world, so she doesn't know how to fix any of the issues that we're talking about. I promised the people I would not take corporate special interest money, and I haven't. I'm relying on the people of the state of Wisconsin. And I plan to go to Washington, not owing anybody a thing and doing the right job for the people of Wisconsin.
Coming up next, there are plenty of other big races in Wisconsin. One of those contests will determine who will replace Mike Gallagher in Congress. Hear from both sides after the break. We are back now with our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot, taking a closer look at the races here in Northeast Wisconsin. Congressman Mike Gallagher resigned from Congress this past spring, and Northeast Wisconsin will be choosing who takes his seat. Wisconsin OB/GYN doctor Kristen Lyerly is running as a Democrat against Trump-endorsed businessman and former owner of the Dino Stop gas stations, Tony Weed. Both of them spoke with me shortly after the primary to make their case for Congress. We had Andre Jacques, current state senator, Roger Roth, former state senator, 2 guys with a lot of name recognition. You came out of nowhere. What did it for you? Was it your message? Was it your Trump endorsement? Was it something those 2 were not offering? From your view, where do you think you won?
Well, it was a variety of things, but ultimately I'm coming in with a business background. And, my wife Angela and I ran a small business right here in Northeast Wisconsin for almost 30 years. And I think people, look to that as somebody that can solve problems day in and day out. And, basically I was somebody that was from the outside, and I think people like that fresh perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. The economy, a big issue in this election, not just locally here, but also nationally. With you, if you are elected, is that business background something that will help you to deal with that issue? I mean, what can you bring to the table?
Well, running a small business where you have to make every single decision in the business. Fortunately, I was a partner with my wife, and we both really leaned into each of our strengths. But running a small business, you have to really be strong, and you have to make really tough decisions day in and day out. And with things like the economy and the issues that we're dealing with at the national level, just having a budget, making sure that we're going line by line in our budget day in and day out, looking at every single expense, finding ways of growing our revenue in order to have a successful business.
Your opponent, I am quite sure, is going to hit you hard on the abortion issue. She is totally for. You are, I imagine, totally against. How are you going to fight that battle?
Well,
what is your argument there?
Well, Angela and I are, our greatest joy in life is our 4 children. They're all in college. One is now in grad school. And again, that's the greatest joy of our lifetime. And, the Supreme Court made the decision, and abortion is in the state's hands where it was before, and that's where it belongs.
How will you help in securing that southern border if elected?
Yeah, what's happened in the last 3.5 years during the Biden and Harris administration is a tragedy. The border is completely overrun, and we're seeing things like criminality and drugs and sex trafficking and all of the elements that are coming with not knowing who's crossing our border. We're seeing over 15 million people probably that have come across this border. And what we need to do is get back to the basics of what President Trump did when he was in office. One, of course, we need to build that border wall and make sure that we have the funding to do that. I believe strongly in President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, which doesn't allow for people to cross the border and then apply for asylum. And I think that really reduced the border crossings by almost 90%.
How will you run against Tony Weed, obviously without giving away too much? What will be your plan of attack?
Well, I'm entirely different than my opponent. I am a first-generation college student. I am of the district, 6 generations deep. I'm someone who has a lifetime of public service in my past, from Girl Scouts to National Honor Society at Kaukauna High School to Doctors in Recital, a great organization that raises money for lots of local nonprofits, to the work I do at Wello. And it's not just in the public arena, but it's also in my professional organization, the elected positions that I've held there and the service that I've provided both at home and across the country. That is my background. It is my deepest desire to make life better for people.
Strengthening the economy. Everybody wants to do that. Nobody's got the answer. How do you approach that?
Well, there isn't one answer. This is a multifactorial approach, and it is really the number one thing. No matter who I talk to, everybody is worried about the economy. Everything is expensive. Food is expensive. Gas is expensive. Housing is expensive. Getting an education is expensive. We have to ensure that we crack down on corporate price gouging. Corporate profits have gone up. 50% of inflation is due to corporate profits, and that's off of our backs as we are trying to provide food for our families.
Most of the Republican Party hammering away at securing the southern border. Do you have any concept, any ideas on how that can be done? Again, this is one we've been dealing with since the Eisenhower administration.
Yeah, it's always going to be a struggle, but there was a solution. Remember, we had a bipartisan solution. It's still there. It was created by some of the most conservative members of the Senate and some of the most liberal members of the Senate. And it would have passed if it hadn't been for Donald Trump saying, no, I want to be able to campaign on this issue because I know that it is an issue that creates fear in people's hearts. That's wrong. That's politics over people.
One of your biggest issues, the biggest in the November election, abortion. For you, does it come down to the government staying out of and leaving it up to women and their doctors solely, those two people?
Tom, don't we all want the freedom to make our own personal healthcare decisions? I'm not just talking about abortion. I'm talking about a new cancer diagnosis, or when you have a new blood pressure problem and you need a medicine. Don't you want to be part of that conversation and be in charge of what happens next? There's no way for the government to regulate our individual healthcare choices. They're too personal. They're too deeply involved in the specifics of our own personal situations. And it just doesn't work for any of us.
And we have yet another seat up for grabs in Congress. We'll meet the candidates for the 6th Congressional District in Wisconsin, a seat the Republicans have held for the last 60 years. And welcome back to our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot special as we get to know the candidates for the biggest races here in Wisconsin. The 6th Congressional District has been held by a Republican since 1964. That's 60 years. And incumbent Glenn Grothman is hoping to continue that trend. But his Democratic opponent and former lawyer, John Zarbano, thinks we are due for a change. What was the trigger? What made you decide to challenge Glenn Grothman?
It was a combination of things. First, the armed insurrection on January 6, 2021. When I became a Wisconsin lawyer, I took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and of Wisconsin. I felt betrayed by the armed insurrection on January 6th. Mm-hmm. And then when Glenn Grothman ran in 2022 unopposed, I said, no, this stops now. We need leaders for the 6th Congressional District. And Glenn did not show leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to run.
Sir, you've worked with Wisconsin's Republican legislators on your Health Care of Wisconsin plan. What is that?
It is a statutory plan that provides direct medical services to folks under 65 without using tax dollars. It's a market-based plan that started with a simple question: if I want health care, why am I buying insurance? You buy insurance for things that you don't expect to happen, but that sometimes do. Your house burns down, you're in a car wreck. Mm-hmm. And so, but when you have health insurance, you're going to use it.
You're on the campaign trail. What are you hearing at town meetings and the places you appear? What are people concerned about?
People are concerned about gas and groceries. It is inflation, although it is within 1% of Jerome Powell's target, it doesn't feel that way. I know gas is coming down as it does this time of year, but groceries don't feel that way, because even though when they were at their highest, it was the 8% inflation, and now that we're down less than 3%, they're still high. And so we'd have to take a look at what I call seller's inflation, or price gouging, if you will, and to see if have the grocery industry answer some questions, that invite the CEOs to Congress and ask them questions about why are you selling less food and making record profits?
Mm-hmm. The abortion question. Where do you stand on that? To what degree?
All right, we have to start at the beginning. Every man and every woman in this country has the personal fundamental right to make their own decisions about their own lives. And that includes health care. And for women, health care includes access to contraception, in vitro fertilization, and abortion.
Immigration, thorn in the side of every administration going back to Dwight Eisenhower. What's your answer to this?
Okay.
I know that's a nebulous question. Nobody has done it yet.
It is, within the first 100 days that I'm in Congress, I'm going to dust off that bipartisan Senate compromise bill and reintroduce it introduce it into the House. Into the House and push it forward.
You've been to the border. What did you see? What were your impressions?
Well, first of all, it's the sheer volume of people coming across. Until recently, there was 1 month we hit over 350,000 coming across in 1 month. You see people from all around the globe. It depends on the border where you set up. There are times where it seems like it was primarily Brazilian. There was a time in San Diego when the second most common nationality was Russian. You really realize you're getting people from all around the globe. Secondly, you realize these are not necessarily starving people. Okay, if you look at the clothes people have, if you look at how well fed they look, you realize you're not dealing with people on their last legs. they, as the Border Patrol will point out to you, you're largely dealing with people who just want to make more money here than you are in, say, Guatemala or Brazil or somewhere.
Congress had that one piece of bipartisan legislation. The rap was that Trump nixed it because it would make Joe Biden look good. Was that the case? Was it presidential politics, or was there something in that bill that really was flawed?
No. Oh, it was flawed because we're still letting way too many people come here. You know, something that would be intolerable. If, you know, this is a myth that the Democrats have put out there. If you look at when Donald Trump publicly disagreed with that law, there were all sorts of Republicans who disagreed with it in the first place. Years ago, before he got to Congress, there was a so-called bipartisan bill. And when the public weighed in and they found out how many people were coming across under the bipartisan bill, that bill died. The same thing was here. It was a poorly drafted bill by a senator who on a personal level is a nice guy, but I think he was just eager out of his mind to say, I'm the hero, I drafted the bill. And then the other senators looked at it, the other congressmen looked at it and said, hey, wait a minute, this is still going to allow way too many people across.
Abortion. Where are you on abortion?
I've always been pro-life, but I'll tell you, President Trump has made it clear on a federal level that we're not going to be doing anything. So quite frankly, I'm not planning any bills on that for the next 4 years, because President Trump, if he's the Republican president, he's not going to push anything. And it's a tragedy. I think there are other things we can do to hold down abortions. I was reading an article recently, more people getting married, less abortions. So if we can change the welfare system and have more people getting married, that'll save a lot of lives.
What's top of mind for you? What's on the top of your agenda, topic A?
Well, I think we need to look at the welfare system, because that leads to so many people not working. I think it leads to depression. I think it leads to the breakdown of the family. And if there's something that I am going out of my way to push in Washington, that's it.
Up next, we shift our focus to what's happening in Madison. And with new voting maps, some districts will be seeing new leadership. The candidates for the 30th State Senate District are next. Welcome back to our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot special. This past year, voting maps changed across Wisconsin, forcing some state senators and representatives to run in different districts. An example of this would be State Senate District 30, which was held by State Senator Eric Wimberger. But he is now running for District 2. So who takes his place? I spoke with Alloway Village President Jim Rafter and his Democratic opponent Jamie Wall as they run for the seat in Madison. As you well know, in Madison right now, it is loggerheads. It is gavel in, gavel out. Republicans especially have no love lost for this governor. It seems as though if it's your idea, it's a bad idea. Do you ever see the day coming where we can get together and reach across the aisle again, or is this Madison life forever?
I sure hope so, and I hope to be part of that. I hope to be part of that solution. As I said earlier, I've brought Democrats and Republicans together into one room on things that they would not agree on. Everyone using the prison as an example. But I've brought them together, and all you have to do is treat people with respect. People have different ideas. But I do believe everyone wants the same thing. They want a great Wisconsin. So if I'm lucky enough to be elected and serve as the senator of the 30th district, I will focus on the people. I will focus on the projects instead of focusing on the parties.
If and when you are elected and you do go to Madison, will you bring the prison question to Madison?
Yes, sir.
What will you do with that question? What will be your goal?
After doing this for 9 years, working on GBCI, I've learned an awful lot. Yes, it's a tremendous opportunity for economic development, but it's also a problem in the DOC. The DOC needs help. So I hope to be able to engage with Republicans, with Democrats, with politicians, with the department heads, people who have been impacted by that system, whether they've been incarcerated or they're a family member of the incarcerated, or people in the community that are impacted. Bring all those voices together, as we have over the last couple of years, so that we can come together as one team, one Wisconsin, to get the job done and have people be proud of what we do.
Why for State Senate District 30 that you are the person, Jim Rafter, to go to Madison on our behalf?
Over the last 10 years, I've served on the Village of Alloway board, and I absolutely love it. I love making a difference. I've told my kids forever, as long as you do something that's going to change the lives of others in a positive way, go do it. And that's how I've lived my life. So being part of Alloway and making a difference, as I believe I have over the last 10 years, and the leadership I've shown in getting people in Madison to do things they didn't want to do, even though I was a village president, I think that speaks volumes to my ability to get things done.
Well, Jamie, you know what's going on down in Madison. Loggerheads. The Republicans have no use for this governor. It is gavel in, gavel out. Are the days of reaching across the aisle over with? Is it simply a matter of numbers? We've got more of them. We call the shots.
Well, I don't think those days should be over. I think there is room. Not everything needs to be a knife fight all the time. You can't take the politics out of politics, but you know, we've got some real problems in Wisconsin, and you know, some of them, if you had a group of reasonable people who could get around the table and could get the facts together, you could probably hash out a compromise. We haven't had a chance to look at things like anything from how the schools ought to be funded to, you know, what should the state's prison system look like? And people are going to disagree, but some of that is just dollars and cents and what makes sense. And that's how I've spent my career. If you want a partisan bomb thrower, I'm not your guy. If you want somebody who's going to go to Madison and empower the same people who've been tying the state government up in knots for the past decade, I'm not your guy either. But if you want somebody who's going to work hard, who's going to listen to his constituents, and who's going to try to do the best you can for them, well, I'd be honored to have your vote.
You spent a few years running Wisconsin's economic development programs. What was your role there, and how would what you did translate into becoming a legislator?
Well, I'd say just a couple things. First of all, I mean, I enjoyed that work because you were part of facilitating the success of businesses. And, you know, look, I'm running for political office. We think and talk a lot about government, obviously, and I'm sure we're going to in this interview, but it's the private sector that drives the economy and, you know, provides, you know, all the revenue that, you know, we use to pave the streets and run the schools and everything else, all right? So this was part of state government that was devoted to helping Wisconsin businesses. One of the areas there that I was particularly proud of is we did a lot of work to work with smaller startup businesses and to make sure that they had the funding that they needed to expand. And because it turns out that if you want your economy in 10 years to look different from what it does now, you've actually got to do a good job of growing a crop of entrepreneurial businesses, and not all of them are going to make it, but some of them are going to go out and succeed and you know, and employ people and do all the other good things. The other thing I think that would be relevant is that you know, I had kind of a worm's eye view, or you know, of state government, and I think a lot of politicians, you know, talk and think in big generalities, but haven't had a chance to be actually, you know, where things were happening out in the agencies. I think that is going to be a good perspective.
Before we go, we take a look at a race for the state assembly. The state representative in Assembly District 56 is looking to keep his spot against his opponent. Both candidates tell their side next. Welcome back to Newsmaker Sunday, Behind the Ballot, as we take another look at some of the races here in Northeast Wisconsin. The last race we'll be looking at is the race for State Assembly District 56. Republican incumbent Dave Murphy seeking another term. Democratic challenger Emily Cephas hoping to flip the district blue. You're chair of the Democratic Party of Outagamie County.
I am, yes.
What do you do in that role?
We do a lot. A lot of it is electoral politics, so that means that we're working on a very local level, all through, as well as through the federal elections to get progressive champions elected. And we are also doing things on the community service level, which is, we just finished up a lunch debt relief program for one of our local school districts. But we're working all the time. connecting with our neighbors and helping them where we can.
You got involved in politics in Nashville, Tennessee.
I did.
Why and what were you doing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had my 3 children.
Yeah.
And one that was a toddler in 2016 and one that was on the way. And so for a while I thought, like, if I create this safe little bubble for my kids, like, that's good enough. But then 2016 happened, and I saw a lot of things happening at the federal and state level that were really adverse to what I believe to be true about how our country should operate and our local community in Nashville should operate. And I got myself involved there. And I think once you get involved in your local politics and realize the real implications and impact that it can have on any community member, good or bad, you can't turn it off.
Investing in public education.
Yes, so investing in public education, like I said, we had those 92 referendum questions that were up. And I don't shy away from the fact that outdoors I'm talking to folks about the fact I've got 2 kids that attend a private school system, the same system my husband graduated from, and we love it. And it's an excellent community. My youngest son has an IEP, so that individualized education plan, and he cannot go to a private school because he has professionals that he needs to see every day. So in order to get the adequate and appropriate education for him, he has to go to a public school, and we are grateful for the professionals that he sees at that public school. So I'm a believer that those private schools can exist, but we need to fully fund our public schools with public dollars. And right now that's not happening.
Your view on abortion.
So,
to what extent?
Yeah, and I talk to people about this on Doors all the time, but I lead with the fact that I am a mom and I have carried 2 children. And I also am a survivor of sexual violence. And so I'm holding the beauty of life, like what it means to go to an ultrasound and pray for a heartbeat, and what it means to face your 20-week anatomy scan and pray that everything's okay. And I also know how terrible the world can be and that there are really delicate decisions that have to be made. And so in those instances, we need to make sure that politicians are not in the doctor's offices with the woman and her healthcare provider, regardless of when and how and if they want to have a family that is between a woman and her provider and nobody else.
Preparing students for employment in order to stimulate the economy. Are we not preparing them? Where's the issue there?
Well, besides being the chair of the Colleges and Universities Committee in the Assembly, I also am a founding director of a nonprofit called Free Speech for Campus. We did a series of hearings in our committee last year on free speech, and we talked about whether students, parents, taxpayers, and employers are getting their money's worth from the university system. Because many employers are telling us that the students coming to them out of college aren't as well prepared as they should be. And so I'm concerned about making sure that our college students in our UW system are the best and brightest.
The abortion question,
Sure.
Where do you stand? To what degree? Under what conditions?
So I really believe that the Supreme Court decision was absolutely accurate. It was, I don't believe there's anything in the Constitution that says states can't make a law regarding abortion. And so the Supreme Court stepped in and said, yes, we believe that's true, and states now have the right to make that decision. We passed a bill in this last session that would have taken it to the voters of Wisconsin and let them speak out on it in a referendum. And I like that idea. Senator Ron Johnson was the one who actually, I think, came up with that to begin with, saying that we want to let the people speak. Because at the end of the day, I'm pro-life, but I also represent people. And it's my job to read the people and say, okay, I'm going to represent you and do what you think is best.
Getting road construction back on track through responsible budgeting. I mean, road construction, it's back on track.
Well, and
what did you mean by that?
Well, sometimes I get blamed for being someone who likes to spend a little money on roads, and
Yeah.
I've worked on that pretty hard. I was the point man on the Highway 41 upgrade between Appleton and De Pere.
Okay.
And we got that done, and it got it done in record time. When I got into the legislature, upgrading that piece of highway was not in the plan. We got it in the plan, got it funded, and got it moving forward in a very short period of time. The other piece that was important to my district was Highway 15 and the Highway 15 bypass. And that bypass is going to be tremendous for the city of New London. It's going to draw New London much closer to the Fox Valley.
Thank you for joining us for our Newsmaker Sunday Behind the Ballot special. The election is just hours away at this point, and if you haven't already, make a plan to vote. I'm Tom Zalaski. Have a great day.